Welcome to Pro Audio Profiles. My name is Brendan Decora, and each week I'll be hosting different guests, mainly engineers and producers, but also people from across the industry. Enjoy. On today's show, we have Chris Rakestraw. He has credits with Megadeth, Danzig, Parkway Drive, Deftones, and many more. Check it out. So first and foremost, thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate it.
It took us a minute to get together, but I'd rather do it in person than
absolutely
over the old internet. So
absolutely.
if it's anything like mixing, I'd rather just talk directly than be online.
Exactly. I'd like to start off by if you could go over your kind of backstory, your history, how you got to where you are, that kind of thing.
Yeah, okay. Grew up in North Carolina, played in punk bands and stuff, things like that, played bass, and so I was into music, and I always tended to be like the person who was like, if someone else came up with a couple different riffs, I was the guy that would help, like, okay, this is how do we put this in a song. I didn't know how to do that.
Right.
But I always seemed to be that person kind of that would corral the things together.
You were the producer.
Yeah, but I didn't know. I was just
know
like, let's make the song go A, B, A, B,
right.
D, F, E, or whatever. Anyway, so then I ended up moving to San Diego, went to intro to the recording studio.
Okay.
I thought I was really doing something, and I took it was all MIDI, intro to recording studio, not a single microphone in the building. It was all just MIDI and programming. And, so I did that, and I really enjoyed it.
Okay.
And I met this guy, Gunnar Ramstrom, I think was his name. He was a rocket scientist, fully rocket scientist, and he shared with me the Los Angeles Recording Workshop in LA. So after he told me about that, I was like, maybe I should try this for a little bit, you know. And so I went to LA, went to LARW. It was like, what was it? Maybe like a 2-month course or something at that point. It was a pretty laughable experience, like all recording studios. Yeah. I mean, recording schools.
Right.
So I did that. Met somebody called the studio once, needing an intern just to go get donuts on a session or whatever. So I did that. Met an engineer. That engineer ended up introducing me to Ken at Pacifique Studios in North Hollywood. I don't know if many people know about that place, but they were one of the first people that had the K.
Yes.
So I was immediately on the J, SSL J and K, which is cool. I remember like Ken setting me down and teaching me directly. He was like the owner, one of the three brothers, I think, that owned that place, and he was teaching me. Expressly, I don't know if that's the right word, but specifically remember the 4-channel pan thing. I thought that was going to be everything in the SSL. Never automated a 4-channel pan again in my life.
Nobody used it.
Exactly. And Super Q, and never used it again.
Right.
So after, I met you at Paramount.
Yep.
So the way I got to Paramount was they bought the J9000 from Pacifique.
Oh, okay.
And I found that out, so I called Paramount. I was like, you got anybody that knows how to use your new board? And they did it. So I was like, I've been on that board for about a year if you want me to work for you. So Mike and Adam at that point, everybody knows who Mike and Adam is. They're moguls in the studio world. Yeah. They were kind enough to give me the job over at Paramount. And I assisted there for like 3 or 4 years, which is on the cusp of just being too long, I feel like. Yeah. If you're not breaking out by that time, just go be a plumber or something because you're not cut out. But, I'm sure other people would argue about that. And that's where I met you through many fun sessions and, No,
that's cool.
And at that point, that's where I met Danzig. I saw him on the board one day and I was like, Mike, you're putting me on the Danzig session. Like, I don't care. I'm on that session. He's like, you think you're ready to engineer? I remember that exactly.
Really?
You know how Mike talks. He's always like quite charming, but he's like, you think you're ready to, be the engineer? I was like, put me on that. So he put me on it.
So you didn't even engineer before that?
I was still assistant.
Oh, okay.
And you know how it is. Like sometimes a no-name client will come in and they'll throw an assistant on just to get some experience. Yes. But at that point, I think I knew which way the Neve knob went at that point.
Right. Exactly.
But anyway, I worked for about 3 hours with Glenn, and he asked me to do some quite untraditional things with his vocal.
Right.
Because he was never really happy with the way people were recording his vocals. And I was always down to do whatever. I'll swing a mic over my head if it, makes somebody happy. Yeah. So I set up a 87 on top of a D112, total like different thing. And he wanted a room mic, so I threw like a 414 or something up in the room. And that was his vocal chain. It was like 3 mics all together. And since he saw that I was like down to try stuff and, make it sound the way he wanted.
Right.
Which I think is important.
Yeah.
And that one lesson kind of like led me forward, like, don't be so firm about things. But it was about 3 hours later. He's like, "You want to do the whole record?" I was just like, that was one of those moments like, fuck yes, I want to do the whole record. So from there on, I was an engineer, and then kept going from there. But,
and you had you built out your own studio and worked there for a while too.
I
Tell
did.
me about that.
It was like 05 or 06. I started building a place on Sunset. That was Sunset Lodge Recording. It was classic. It was like just a big room for drums.
Right.
And I had a control room that I built out. I'm a woodworker, so.
Okay. You did it all yourself?
Yeah.
Nice.
It took a minute, but I found some studio that went out of business in Hollywood, and I called the guy up. I was like, "Hey, is it cool? I'll give you a couple $100 to come pull out like a couple pieces of wood." And he's like, "Yeah, okay, that's fine." I showed up with the whole crew and gutted the entire facility. I was pulling dimmers out of the wall.
Right.
Those great big
Those
before
are
we got LEDs. These big giant transformers,
professional dimmers,
transformer dimmers or whatever. And the guy came back the next day. It was like, holy shit! I had like trailers full of wood.
He wasn't even there.
He wasn't there. He just showed up the next day. It was like, oh my god, the lights don't even work anymore. So that was a kind of a nice way to get my place set up.
There you go.
And I remember my first session, I think, was on 6606.
Okay.
And it was a Danzig session with Hank 3. Nice. So it was Hank 3's band and Danzig, and of course the date 6606.
Yeah, you had to.
They were doing their rehearsals for the show. That was like either that night or the next night, I think. Right. But that's a monumental date, so you have to remember that with spooky Danzig.
Nice.
So. But that was my place, and I operated that from 06 until 2013.
Right.
And at that point, I was pretty beat up from trying to keep that place open for 7 years, which got hats off to studio managers and studio owners, because I never want to do that again. I opened that place thinking, oh, this will be an opportunity to be in control of all the projects you want and record whenever you want. And it ended up being, you got to make overhead every month.
Just trying to keep it booked, and
that was an eye-opening experience. Awesome. Never do that again. So
you worked a lot with Matt Hyde during that time.
Yeah, he's the whole reason I have a career as far as I'm concerned.
Okay, awesome.
I mean, he was an early mentor.
Yeah.
That, I didn't mean to cut you off.
But
Matt is the best.
Awesome.
And I went, you know how it was working at Paramount. Mm-hmm. You get an opportunity to work with this producer, that producer, this engineer, all walks, all types. And me and Matt hit it off. There was a casual conversation in the kitchen of Paramount. Mm-hmm. And I mentioned like in the 2610 was my favorite vocal preamp.
Right.
And he kind of like clicked. He was like, yeah, that's exactly. He's like, and we both realized that we had a similar perspective on audio. Right. And after that, it was like every job he did, I was on. And awesome. He was a large reason I had the opportunity to start my studio because a lot of his gear was in it.
Okay.
So I give my whole career is, I give it up to Matt Hyde.
Awesome.
So I love that guy to
awesome. So a lot of what I like to talk about on the podcast is kind of how to inspire artists in the studio. When you're starting off a project with a new artist, how do you sort of figure out what their vision is for the project and get inside their head?
I listen. There's a couple things that are artist related and a couple things that are logistic related. Mm-hmm. And I think part of our job is to manage those without the logistics being the dominant factor. Meaning, an artist has this idea of how they want a record to turn out, but it's up to us to think about the budget, the planning, and all the logistics to go, oh yeah, this is how we end up with a vibey thing that we can actually complete under budget, which I don't think is talked enough, is that that's a very real thing to consider, especially as a producer who has to handle all of that.
Right.
But to answer the artistry side, I think it's important to mention real stuff too, like the money.
Of course.
So with an artist, I got to listen first. I got to hear their music and see if I even want to be a part of it. Because I won't do an artist a disservice of hearing their music, not getting it,
right,
and go, all right, let's start Monday. I won't do it. And there's been multiple things where I'm like, let me, I'll send you to my homie who could probably do this better than me or more appropriate for you. So that's the first thing. Make sure I'm the person to do it. And after that, listen to their music, hear their strong points, hear their weak points, and see if they're even considering those.
Right.
Because you might get on a project with someone who's wants to do a screamo record or something, but they're just their voice is never going to sound good like that. So you try and help with that. I don't know. I guess that's probably I try and just base myself in reality about the project first.
Right.
See if it's realistic. And if I see if they can even get to their vision,
of course,
if that makes sense. Of course, I'm kind of speaking in younger artists terms there.
Yeah.
But for other artists that are a little more established, it's less so of that, and just making sure that they keep up to the standard they expect.
Of course, and that's actually ties into my next question. Is you have a unique perspective because you owned your own studio for a long time, but the question is like, how do you set up the studio to be a creative playground for an artist? But as a studio owner, it's like you have a little bit more leeway in that versus someone that's just booking a room for the day. How do you kind of prepare and figure out how to make it inspiring and creative for the artist?
Safety nets, I think, is probably a good way to do it.
Okay.
Pro Tools obviously is playlists, so this was a perfect example of yesterday. I was tracking drums, and the artist had some big gaping holes where it was a guitar only.
Right.
They're like, I wouldn't mind having a safety net of if there were drums under that part, just in case.
Right.
So you know what? I didn't feel a bit of anxiety. I was like, cool, playlist 14, got it. Okay, then I bring the other stuff forward. And for guitars and stuff, I take a DI with everything, like a clean DI, straight out of the guitar. So any artist could be like, hey, let's try this whack pedal, or this cool pedal, and see what it does. And I don't have a bit of anxiety. I'm like, yeah, let's do it.
Yeah.
And then if they find out later it's bad, we just reamp it with the clean DI and change the sound.
It's all good.
In a similar fashion, I've done that where we like track a record or whatever, find out something's wrong, punch a DI in a hotel room somewhere.
Right.
And then we haven't lost anything because it's the same sound. Same sound, same guitar, and so safety nets help.
Do you find when you're mixing, every time I'm mixing, I always ask if the client has it for the clean DI track. But in general, I find myself not using it a lot because it's to change the guitar sound as a mixer can be a little bit of a can of worms because they're so attached to that sound. Do you find that you use that when you get those, or how do you work with those?
100%. I mute them immediately. No, I'm kidding. I use them if I have to. If someone's if simple, like I did a track a couple months ago, well-intentioned, but some people only have a couple amps, so they record everything with the same sound.
Right.
And it's not even a poor decision. It goes back to just simple logistics.
Right.
So I'll take that DI and put it through some of my stuff, and can oftentimes come up with a really cool character, a character tone, versus just like left-right rhythms.
Yeah.
Then there's like the real character tones that you can do. I use it like that, and I only do it if I have to, and if I don't have the DI, it's a little tougher to clean up certain, how it is as a mixer. Every once in a while, if you hear a little off note or something, you might give it a little nudge or something.
Right. But and it's easier with the DI. Yes, exactly.
It's strictly a fundamental helper.
Right.
Whether it's there or not, it doesn't affect.
But then how do you, as a mixer myself, like one of the biggest conversations I have with clients is, how do you judge where to take the mix?
I do what I do, and if they don't like it, they can.
They don't like it. Fuck
else.
You.
No, it's not a fuck you. It's It's funny you answered me this because I had a conversation last night. I was talking to the artist, and I told him, I was like, look, my mix is going to be a whole different direction. If you like it, we'll keep working together, and if you don't, you can either give me notes or totally go somewhere else. Like,
Right.
I don't have any problem with an artist getting exactly what they want.
Right.
If I can be the person that helps that and takes it to a little place they maybe didn't think of because they don't have that experience too, it's great. And most of my clients, when they hear this, they're like, oh, that's cool. I never would have thought of that. I love that idea.
Right.
Because I think a lot of people want you to just like serve cool stuff on a platter.
Of course.
But
they don't know and have the experience or whatever. Yeah.
And I have no problem just being like, here's some awesome stuff. If you guys like it, cool. If not, I'll just go back to what you had and put the muddy guitars up the middle. And no, I'm just kidding. Yeah. That's kind of a negative perspective, but
no,
it kind of makes my point.
Yeah, for sure.
I have no fear about any of that. I'll try it. If I get shot down, I don't get hurt at all.
Right.
It's like means nothing to me.
Nice. Yeah. And how do you? It's kind of a fine line, especially with artist to artist, but how do you balance artistic integrity with commercial viability when producing a record?
I don't think about it at all.
Yeah.
Commercial viability. If there is a word that can fuck off, it's commercial viability.
That's true.
Honestly, there's probably not a phrase that means less to me on the planet than that.
Right.
The record I'm working on right now is extremely... I consider it pure art, avant-garde thing, and I detach myself from any kind of like relation to fundamental rock music or fundamental American music at all, and just let go completely because it's what the artist wants to put out, and I respect that greatly. Because there's always pressure from what was the word you used? Commercial
viability.
Commercial viability. Yeah. And that reminds me of Falling Down. The guy with the signs like, "Are you economically viable?" So if you're not economically viable in your art, that's just a dreadful phrase altogether. And to be honest, I'd rather never get hired again and go put on a vest at Walmart than think about commercial viability. I absolutely despise it. It's 100%. I mean, it's can I do it? Yeah, sure. I can, put some reverb on something. It's cool. I don't know, whatever the definition of commercial. I know what you're saying.
Yes.
And I think...
The main point is not to strive for that necessarily. Yeah. Like you're doing the art a disservice by... thinking of that instead of focusing on what is meaningful for the artist.
Because there's no reason something can't sound awesome and be commercially viable just because it's good.
Right.
That's where I think commercial viability comes from. If it's good, it doesn't have to fit like whatever.
Right. That's exactly.
That might be a basic opinion, but
no, it's true. It's true.
Yeah.
And how, when it comes to the evolution of music production, how have changes in technology and industry trends influenced your production style?
Gotcha. That's a good question. I think with the advent of a lot of fake amps, it's easy to get really close ideas down early on.
Right.
And I think that's a good thing. You can really flesh out songs, like all the pre-production stuff can sound very close with these fake amps. I think that's a positive. I mean, there are purists that'll thumb that down, but it means nothing because it's just another way for artists to get their idea out.
Right.
So to communicate to you what their record's going to be like.
Right.
So I like that. There's another side of it where all these production techniques, which is basically every man can be a producer if he buys a bundle of plugins and stuff. That kind of elevates the people that haven't spent the time to think that they're up here without all the hard work that people like us have done.
Right.
And that might sound boomerish or whatever, but it's true. You've received the mix sessions, and I've received the mix sessions from people that have the same plugins as we do.
Right.
So it's kind of, it's like giving a monkey a shotgun. It's like you give a monkey a shotgun, he's going to blow his head off. So that's kind of how I feel about the technology.
Right.
There's a lot of kids just blowing their fucking heads off out there with all these plugins.
Well, the main point is to take the time to learn, the skills and develop your talents and all that.
That kind of goes without saying, but I think it's there's a lot of shortcuts being taken. But other than that, I love the fact that amazing gear is affordable now. I think that's wonderful. And I don't know. The real answer I would answer that is I don't really care that much because it doesn't matter so much about that as it does the person using it.
Right.
You know, you could use an EQ from the 80s or EQ from 2023, and you would still make smart decisions.
Right.
So technology, while we're sold that it's the end all be all,
right.
I really don't give a fuck about it, to be honest. Seriously.
Yeah.
Like, for instance, I'm drum session right now. I've got like $100 mic on the kick because it's the right thing and I know how to use it. It doesn't. I don't have to have the $4,000 mic.
Yeah,
that's a single instance, but
no, it's true because that's a big part of why there's so many vintage studios around. It's like they're using all this equipment from the 50s and 60s. It's like
my point. That's my point. Exactly. Is that people pay the most money for not the newest technology.
Exactly. Yeah.
So technology means nothing, and it's about how you the decisions.
Exactly.
You can make bad decisions with all of that stuff.
Right.
Old and new gear.
Now, you're one of the few people I know that have done studio work and also do live sound. Mm-hmm. Can you tell me about your transition to that and what the differences are, that kind of thing?
Yeah, it's I love it. Yeah. I've been working with Megadeth for a long time. Mm-hmm. Dave's been super kind, giving me all these opportunities. And this past year, he gave me an opportunity to just take over the monitor position.
Okay.
So I said, I've never done it. Let's do it. So I did it. Ended up, first tour was Australia.
Right.
And they're all on in-ears and stuff, so it wasn't that difficult of a job compared to what some guys might deal with.
Right.
But I love it. It's a similar skill set. It's a little bit different.
Yeah.
You know, it's more like managing chaos than it is accentuating, the positive things.
Right.
So, but I like it. It can be a little stressful at times.
Yeah.
And you get a feeling in the hot seat that's similar to when you're like punching a vocalist on analog tape back in the day. Where you're like, I hope I don't screw this up.
Yeah.
But no, it's I love it though.
Awesome.
The monitor engineer seat is it was a challenge to learn at first. We have an amazing front of house guy, Stanley Soares, who's gifted me so much information that I haven't gleaned from 25 years in the live world.
Right.
So I'm playing catch up, and it's fun. I enjoy like having a challenge at my age. Is appreciated.
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
I love that. Yeah.
Absolutely. Have you ever considered doing front of house?
I don't wanna.
Yeah.
I like working with artists.
Right. There you
go.
go.
I feel like at your front of house, you're working with the audience, but like I can't. I guarantee I've affected the show in a positive manner. Almost every night. Mm-hmm. When I hit all my cues and the guitar guys, I love that. Band members, look over at me and they're like. Nice. I'm like, fuck yeah. Nice. You guys are stoked because things are working here.
Right, exactly.
And I love that. And still being able to influence, like talk with James about his bass sounds. That's the same stuff I would do in the studio.
Exactly.
I just happen to be doing it out there.
Yeah. I still remember when I was in recording school, there was we were required to take a class on live sound. And I still remember the teacher explaining that when you're doing these big shows in front of house, like, you literally have the ability to melt the first 10 rows with the tip of your fingers. Yeah. Because the systems are so powerful. And it's like, after that, it's like, I don't want to ever do front of house.
Yeah. And on the other side of that, I have the ability to fry everyone's ears in the drop of a heartbeat with in-ears.
That's true.
One thing goes wrong and everyone's deaf.
Yeah.
So it's crazy. It's a lot of responsibility.
Right. That's 100%. Crazy.
And the other side of that is RF. I'm loving all that. Like the amount of knowledge, like I could read that stuff for hours. I love it.
That's awesome. So back to the studio stuff. From a producer's perspective, what advice would you give to experienced musicians about making the most of their time in the studio?
Prepare. It's all just preparation. You know, if you have your songs mapped out with the tempos and know what parts you're going to be playing, that's everything for me. Don't be too rigid with that, because you got to leave some room for some chaos to happen and ideas to crop up. But for me, it's all prep. I mean, by the time I'm hitting record, we all know what we're doing. I already have in my head what the drums are going to sound like. Right. And you know how that is. You have to have that in your head to even be able to start setting up mics. Yeah. So really, it's all prep. Like, get the drum tech. Get the, I already know what drum heads I want. Right. What kind of kit, etc. Nice. That's not a very great answer, but the truth is just prep. That's really it. And, and practice.
That's a big part of it, though.
I mean, if you have a guitar, if you get your guitar intonated the day before, you don't show up and go, hang on, guys, let me get a screwdriver.
Right.
You know, all that stuff. So.
Yeah, totally.
And that's a very logistic-related question, but it's true.
No, it's true, for sure. I
mean, most people don't show up in the studio with a song they've already written and get new ideas immediately that's going to change the whole record. It's usually just like, okay, cool, let's get this down well.
Right, exactly.
So, that's my perspective on that.
I just want to take a quick break and tell you about my free guide, The Art Method, the Advanced Recording Toolkit. In it, I share the details of how you can get pro studio results from your home studio. I've believed for a long time that it's the cooking, not the kitchen. If you can learn some of the advanced methods for getting great results in the studio, you can do it in any studio. I skip the basics and dive into the more nuanced info you need to level up the quality of your home studio recordings. Check it out now at brendandecora.com/art. And now, back to the show. When it comes to the future of music production, where do you see it heading in the next decade, especially in terms of technological advancements?
Well, things have gotten more, this is not a negative word, but more ADHD, like especially in metal production.
Right.
There's just, chaotic parts that, yet again, reluctant to use the word boomer, but traditional people might look at it as a little like crazy stuff.
Right.
I see a lot of that now. That's just the natural production. Not production, progression.
Right.
Natural progression. In the future, it's a good question. I don't know. I don't have a clue. I know that there's always a rubber banding back when people get too much of something and they push away.
Right.
So maybe with too much technical crap that we have right now, maybe there'll be a little more rubber banding to some more natural music.
Yeah.
Like that sounds like a normal band. Like some of my favorite records from the 90s are just sound like band, like Rage, and,
just a band in a room.
Just a band in a room. Yeah. Maybe that's okay. That I'm going to stick to that. I'm going to go with
there you go.
Band in a room for $200.
Right.
Because that's timeless and will always be good.
Right.
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah.
Is there any current or recent projects that you can't talk about that you want to?
That I can't talk about?
That you can't.
That's a great way to phrase it. No. The answer is yes.
There you go.
Probably in the springtime, I'll be working with this band called Dark Heavens. They're a cool band out of Cali, and perfect example of band in a room. You know, just
nice,
enjoyable like that.
Nice.
But the other stuff that I can't talk about, I won't talk about. So.
All good.
But projects always come and go. So
Definitely.
There's always something on the back burner.
Definitely, awesome. I like to wrap up each podcast with the same kind of set of questions.
Yeah, hit me.
The first one is, who is your most influential teacher?
Matt Hyde, 100%.
Yeah.
100%. There was a record I did, and I was mixing it. I'm not going to say the name because that would incriminate me. But I was mixing a record, and this is early on in my career, And I was just busting my head up on this mix. I sent it to Matt, and we had a long heart-to-heart conversation about how bad this mix was.
Jeez.
I can take it. Hey, it's like, if you can't take that, you're like, jeez, go work at a pillow factory, because that's... So anyway, I came back, and I remixed the entire album, and the artist came in and was like, holy fuck, this is killer. Nice. And it was one of those moments where I'm like, this guy, in 5 minutes, just opened my mind to everything I was doing wrong. Right. And ever since then, those fundamentals that he shared with me stuck, and I've applied them to every bit of work ever since then. Nice. So 100% Matt Hyde.
Awesome.
Yeah, absolutely.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Next question is, what is your favorite reference track if you have to go to a new studio?
Oh, yeah, easy. Audio Slave, Show Me How to Live. Yeah. That's if you put that on in a studio, you will know immediately what the speakers are doing, what the low end's doing, how clear the snap of all of that stuff. You'll hear what a beautiful vocal sounds like.
Right.
And because that record is so well done. Do you know who did that record, by the way? Any idea? Because I'd give him a thumbs up.
I want to say it was Schiffman.
Was it? Wait, Dave Schiffman?
Yeah.
I didn't even know that.
Because I interviewed him a while back, and he said he did the Audioslave records. I don't know which one he did, but I think he was on.
Well, Schiffman's awesome regardless, whether or not he did that record or not. I love Schiffman. But Audioslave 100%. I can't tell you how many times I've played that in a studio and like, okay, now I know what my top end's doing. Right. Let's start getting guitar sounds. I know what the boominess of the kick, all that. And then some other stuff I might do is, I'll just stick with that. I have a couple others that that's I might use. But,
for sure.
Yeah. Okay. Oh, and maybe there's a Beyonce song with Drake. I forget the name of it, but the vocal is so perfect on it that anytime I'm working on like a female vocalist, I might reference that.
Right.
I forget the name of the song. I just always hit play.
Okay.
Awesome.
Last question.
Yep.
What would be one tidbit you have for an upcoming engineer?
Quit. No, that's a great question. And that's a very important question for me. I would say increase your financial IQ immediately, because this job, you need to be smart with your money from the get-go. You need to throw away the Guitar Center magazines, open up your retirement account, because this is very important. Like people like you and me are self-employed.
Yeah.
And we don't have these pensions that are handed to us.
Of course.
We don't have health insurance that's handed to us. So we have to handle all that ourselves. So get your retirement things in order, your IRAs, your Roths, all of that stuff.
Yeah.
Pay attention to taxes.
Yeah.
That's the biggest thing. And really be an adult about that. And that will allow you to progress in your music career and not have to quit and go do something else for a living because you didn't take care of your money. Right. So I would say that's the biggest thing, because, usually young engineers are like, they're all excited about buying mics and buying gear and all of this stuff. And it's like, that'll all come. Yeah. But if you build these habits now, it can change your life forever.
Definitely.
Yeah, so that's probably the main thing. And don't go to recording school. Fucking hell. It's the biggest ripoff ever.
Well, it's such actually, I wanted to touch on that.
Yeah, let's touch on it. I'll drag them through the mud.
That is a conflicting point of view, in my opinion, because...
You're wrong.
Well, no.
Let's hear it.
Only because a lot of big studios now won't even entertain interns if they haven't been to recording school.
Then don't work at a big studio. That's not the only answer.
I know, but they don't want to invest in training people the super basics when they just need people to. My thing
is, why take out an $80,000 loan at a 9% interest rate when you can go to YouTube and learn all that shit in a weekend? Don't you know for a fact that I'm right, that all of what we do, you can learn in a weekend.
I don't know about a weekend.
You just put on YouTube. And I know, really, because here's my experience with school. I went to recording school. I got out thinking, I got a career. I'm smart. Right. And I walk into a studio and go, holy fuck, I don't know shit.
Exactly.
So that's why I think recording school is such a rip. Right. It's a $60,000 ticket to learn from real people. Right. By working at a studio. Yeah. Or I don't even know how much people are charging right now, but
there's some schools that are cheaper, and there's, trade schools.
Regardless,
stuff like that.
Though, going into debt for this career is probably the stupidest decision every young person could make. And I'm 100% serious. So you could do so many other things a smarter way.
But it does afford you the opportunity to get into the bigger studios.
Yeah, so does living next to a guy who's an engineer.
Yeah.
I'm just saying.
True.
There's
No, I know. Well, I agree with you, and I disagree, because I don't think you should go to the crazy 4-year college where you get a degree and spend $50,000, whatever. Sure. That's ridiculous. You can go to a trade school, get the same job when you get out as the other guy, and save yourself a mountain of cash.
I get that, but I'd love for you to listen to mixes I did right out of recording school.
Okay.
And see if my recording school was worth it.
Well, they don't. That's the thing, is they don't teach you. They only teach you how to operate the gear. They don't teach you how to make shit sound good.
But even so, you show up in a room, and then they don't teach you how to deal with artists.
No.
That 90% of our job is not the engineering.
Oh, absolutely.
It's they're selling this.
It's all psychology.
This is why I'm so pissed. I'm going to touch on this one more second. This is why I'm so pissed at all these audio universities.
Yeah.
Is they're selling this old antiquated horse shit of 90 channel console, and it's not real. Right. It's not real. Yeah. And all these kids are, reading it, and they don't know any better.
Yeah.
And I think it's more preying on kids that have big dreams and
absolutely,
and no appreciation for interest over the years. Because that 9%
that is true. Like you and I both know, we've seen, I would say, at least 70% of the young kids come into the industry
and go right back out.
Be gone.
They do the Mayor Quimby coming into the whorehouse, just in, put their coat back on, and walk right out.
Yeah, and they've wasted all that time in school and all that money, and they just go do something else.
And now they have a great big debt. So it goes, pay off while they're working as a plumber.
Yeah. But the main point is do it for the right reasons. If you're passionate about it, if you, really feel that that's part of it. Like if you're trying to do it to be an artist, like, I want to be an engineer and I really want to be an artist behind the scenes. There's a lot of people that do that, and it's for the wrong reasons.
I think also I grew up in a more of a punk setting.
Okay.
So my DIY-ness and fuck the traditional is still there and present.
There you go.
So that I will agree that part of that, and there's nothing wrong with buying a 4-track and a 57 instead of getting us $80,000 loan.
Yeah.
So that's
there's also a lot of like both of us came up through the big studios in LA. Mm-hmm. There are mountains of people that have great careers working in smaller towns, never been to a big studio.
Exactly.
Have a small studio or whatever.
And that's reality.
And they have solid careers.
Yeah.
And so that's the point I want to make too, that it's not the only avenue.
Right.
So
my official stance is fuck music school, or audio school.
Oh, good.
Well, look at my friend Stanley, who does front of house for Megadeth. Mm-hmm. He is probably one of the best front of house guys on the entire planet.
Right.
And I don't think he went to audio school for anything. He elbowed his way into it,
Right. Well, that and back in the day there was no school.
That's true.
Too. Most of the older guys that I interview, I just showed up and they gave me a job cleaning the toilet. I learned it there. There was no audio school until the last,
I'm going to stick with Elon Musk on this. All the information you ever want is free on the internet, and it's up to you to either pay for it like a Muppet or not.
Right. Awesome. Awesome, man. Well, I really appreciate you being here.
Dude, I am so happy we had the time to actually hang in person.
Awesome.
Haven't seen you in years, so appreciate it.
It's good to hang. Thanks so much for checking out the show. Make sure to subscribe for all the updates, and I'll see you next week.